Hey everyone, welcome to Dad's Den of Pop Culture. We're going to do a little deep dive today into comic books, in particular, The Flash. Which Flash? Well, both Flashes. I thought it might be interesting to take a look at the first 12 appearances of the original Flash from the 1940s, Jay Garrick, and the new Flash of the 1950s, Barry Allen. Similar to what I did looking at the first year of the Avengers comics and comparing it to the Justice League of America from the same time period. Kind of do that with these two characters, see what made them unique, what made them fun, what made them successful. So let's jump right into it with Flash number one. I should say Flash Comics number one from January of 1940. So that means this year, and I think this is going to be airing February 1st. So we're just past 85th birthday of the Flash, versus Showcase number 4 from October of 1956, introducing the new Flash and from a comic book, a history perspective, introducing the Silver Age. So let's first look at the original Flash and his origin. Poor Jay Garrick is a scrub, and we all know no scrubs, right? He's a scrub on the football team. He's primarily a chemistry student, plays football. Apparently he warms the bench a lot. And his girlfriend, so to speak, Joan Williams, she's just not that interested in a guy that can't make the first team. Well, one night he is working on an experiment late into the night, takes a pause to enjoy a smoke like he did back in 1940, and like some people still do in 2025. And he accidentally knocks over some chemicals, in particular, heavy water. And that's going to be the catalyst that gives him his super powers. Now, he winds up in a coma for quite some time. He wakes up and discovers that he has superpowers. And you see from this image, that's him running through the hospital. Hear people yelling, "A hurricane, a wind, a ghost, my word." And him, can I travel? One element of the classic Flash comics is humor. There's a definite humor aspect to these things. Now, not to the extent of, say, Plastic Man, but they do have fun with the character and his powers in these comics. So he streaks over to where the big game of the year is being held, takes to the field, and, well, you remember in the Superman movie how poor Clark Kent isn't allowed to play football by his parents so people don't discover his superpowers? Well, Jay Garrick doesn't care. So Jay Garrick goes out there speeding around everybody, scoring the big touchdowns. He's the big hero of the game. And that kind of, again, sets up another interesting thing about the Jay Garrick character. Initially, he does not hide his identity. Well, of course, he doesn't wear a mask at all. They'll later kind of peel back that idea. But initially, everybody in America knows who this guy is. So he graduates. Joan's father is a major in the Army, and does some inventing of his own. And so there's a connection there. Well, ultimately, he gets into his first case as the Flash, and he's going up against a guy called Sir Satan. They didn't mess around. And you could see here him starting to use those special abilities, plucking a bullet out of the air because he's just as fast as the bullet is, things of that nature, freaking these people out. But basically, these guys are trying to get some information that Joan's father has. So there's also that aspect of it. And in the end, he manages to break up this little spy ring, and Sir Satan drives his car off the road because he's kind of freaked out about Flash, and he dies. So we like to talk about Batman, some of his early, villains dying, and that makes Batman this really brooding, dark character. Well, kind of the same with the Flash, except nobody thinks of him as brooding and dark. So we get a nice introduction to the character and his personality. He is kind of funny. So a lot of times will associate Wally West with that. If you watch the Justice League cartoons from the 2000s, with him being kind of a jokester, that's a little bit like the Jay Garrick personality. His girlfriend, Joan, knows about him, knows about his powers. Everybody seems to, although the Major Williams doesn't appear to, which is kind of I thought everybody knew about the Flash. Well, he doesn't know. Okay. They're going to deal with that as they go. And so, and you get an idea too about the strips. We're going to be like the early Superman comics, primarily dealing with non-powered, I should say exclusively dealing with non-powered villains. Now that can be tricky because it means that to some degree, they cannot beat the Flash, really. So you have to be creative and you have to be fun about how you're doing the stories to make them work. And fun is kind of the key component of these stories. Oh, I should mention, written by Gardner Fox and drawn by Harry Lampert. And there we go. Next month, another amazing story of the one and only Flash. I just can't imagine, Dad. Anyhow, a secret's a secret, isn't it? So she's keeping his secret, but he isn't. Okay. Showcase number 4, October of 1956. Written by Robert Kanigher. Art by Carmine Infantino and Joe Kubert. So that's right off the bat one of the big features of the Silver Age Flash. The art. It's not only amazing, including when it's not depicting superpowers at all. A really cool sort of style, design. It looks different than a lot of strips. For example, looks very different from the Batman comics of the same period, which still kind of have a more golden age design to them and will for a few more years to come. So this one, we start off with a military radar station on the East Coast picking up something, a strange object, not a UFO, not an identified flying object, is what the guy in charge is saying. Don't start any of these rumors. Look, we're in 1956, so UFOs are a big deal at this point. That's what everybody's buzzing about. Meanwhile, in a police laboratory, scientist Barry Allen chuckles over an old magazine, and that is Flash Comics, starring the original Flash. So, if there's anything really innovative about the Silver Age Flash, it is the concept of the multiverse, which I know can lead to really big problems. At the time, they don't even necessarily introduce the idea of a multiverse, but they do introduce the idea that the original Flash is a comic book character in this world, and Barry Allen is aware of it. What a character Flash was, battling crime and injustice everywhere. And what a unique weapon he had against the arsenal of crime. Speed, supersonic speed, undreamed of speed. So there's a certain amount of this being kind of a love letter to the Golden Age comics. That's definitely there. But it's very creative. And of course, it's going to lead to more creative things as they go. He has a similar experience to Jay Garrick. It involves chemicals, although in his case, it also involves lightning. Now, there's going to be retcons to this story. At the time, you could have something very simple like heavy water, like lightning and chemicals, like a radioactive spider, give you superpowers. These things are pseudoscientific at best. So that's what happens. Look at that art, though. And is that not amazing? And the colors? It's absolutely beautiful. And so he soon discovers that he as well has super speed. And one of the ways he does that is, he's late for a date. And this is going to become a theme with Barry Allen. Late to things with his girlfriend, Iris West. And so he rushes off, and along the way, he discovers, well, kind of like that original Flash, a bullet. And he notices it's traveling very slowly. Now, instead of catching it, he simply gets, the person who's the target out of the way. But again, very similar. And look at the way it's drawn. Look at the way he designs this, right? Infantino does some really interesting things with the character and with, how the super speed, the special effects, maybe you could say, is depicted. And so, inspired by the old Flash comic, he decides to become a real life Flash, and he designs the costume, and we immediately get the ring that the costume can be put into. So, this guy probably should not be working as a police scientist. He seems like he might be a little bit out of the police's league. But so really quickly, we get the design of the costume, which apparently, from what I've heard, was actually inspired by Captain Marvel, Shazam. And it was a character that was going to be a little bit based on that. Infantino, getting this opportunity, adapted the costume to the Flash. And so the Flash basically goes into his first case, which is against a villain called the Turtle. Okay, so the opposite, right? Flash is fast. The Turtle works very, very slowly and methodically. Now, this also introduces another big concept for the Silver Age Flash, which is supervillains. Now, at this point in Batman comics, his arch villains were starting to show up less and less. Why, I don't know exactly. One wonders if there wasn't an attitude of maybe we have too much Joker that's showing up, maybe we need to do something else. Flash starts off with his arch criminals right away. You're going to see that over these 12 issues. The Rogues Gallery is building, and it's building quickly. And characters that survive to this day are there in 1956 with this guy. Well, 56 through, his first 12 appearances occur over more than 12 months. But at any rate, he goes up against the Turtle and frankly wraps up the case pretty quickly. Now, this is another aspect of the Silver Age Flash. Sometimes the endings of the stories are a little anticlimactic. There's a lot of and then there's a villain. Bump. I'll use this and I got him. But they are based very much on the idea of him finding creative ways to use his super speed to solve problems. And as you'll see from the Golden Age Flash, a little bit of that, but primarily he just goes ahead and uses his ability to essentially become invisible, move really fast to solve his problems. Not quite as inventive because he's not dealing like with super criminals. And so in a way, Iris kind of guesses the name of this new unknown superhero. And yes, unknown. Iris is not going to know his identity right away, nor is anybody else. She says, wow, I got there in a flash. And he says, you just said it, the Flash. So inspired by the original, takes the original's name. And there we go. And later, read all about it. The Flash, the fastest man in the world. And we see him and Iris. Love that art. How exciting it would be, to meet the Flash. And he's like, oh, well, sometimes dreams come true, Iris, but not for you. So again, just like with the Golden Age Flash, it sets the series up pretty nicely with themes and ideas that are going to go with the Flash for years and years and years and years and years to come. And are still sort of alive in some of the media, like the Flash TV show on the CW, you see some of this stuff there. They make their changes, but Barry always being late, things like that have survived pretty nicely with the character. On to our next appearances. For the Golden Age Flash, this is Flash Comics number 2 from February of 1940. Story by Gardner Fox. Art by Harry Lampert again. And you notice Hawkman gets the cover of this issue. Where's the respect? Well, Hawkman's a pretty big character at the time, too, and they're going to be sort of sharing the cover duty. Batman, after a few issues of Detective Comics, he had the cover permanently. I think Superman always got the cover of Action. I could be wrong on that. Flash has to share a little bit. And then we're also going to be looking at Showcase number 8 from June of 1957. So like about 6 months later, after the first Silver Age Flash story, written by Robert Kanigher, art by Carmine Infantino and Frank Giacoia. So let's start with the Golden Age Flash. So in this one, Joan Williams gets him involved with a case involving this dancer named Theo Parker. And she's a dancer in a theater, and there's a murder that takes place, and she flees, ends up in the car with Joan, and Jay Garrick sees them walking by, getting into the car. So he runs after. You see him looking in the window. Again, there's the comedy element of these. So a guy named Lord Donnellan is involved. And it seems like what he's doing is committing murders or having murders committed to screw up the theatrical world so that he can buy up theatrical properties cheaply. Kind of a crazy scheme, but it's a comic book. So Flash makes a connection with Theo Parker, kind of surprising her in her bedroom, a little bit saucy. She lets it be known that this Donnellan guy might be involved. So he grabs a phone book, figures out where he is, and off he goes. And they do make it pretty apparent that he's probably moving at around light speed when he does this stuff. So here we see Lord Donnellan, talking about his plan so he can buy all this stuff up, cheap. It's odd, but whatever. The first thing that Jay has to do is get Joan out of the way. You see this, I'm going to take you home. You certainly are not. Oh, no. And he just kind of grabs her and runs. Again, kind of funny. They're going for that sort of, two people that are in love, but have a certain amount of rivalry as well. But he gets her out of the way, and he discovers, of course, there are more targets, more people who are going to be murdered. And so he goes to work saving them through various means. Here we see a singer like in a nightclub, and he's gone. And to deal with the would-be assassin so that he can't get away, he basically steals his clothing at super speed. This is going to be a tactic used often by the Golden Age Flash, not on women. There were rules back then, right? Even if there wasn't a Comics Code Authority yet, there were some rules. They knew better. Another funny bit, he goes off to this mansion where this woman is giving a performance and saves her life. And what's really great is they're saying to her there, you took it very calmly. And then she says, I can't break down here, but on my way back to town, boy, will you hear a woman scream. Really great authenticity to a fantasy sort of tale. And it is funny. And there we see him whizzing through Times Square. So initially he is set in New York City. So he's rushing off to get this Donnellan guy. And in fact, doesn't have too much trouble with him because of the superpowers. So again, kind of like with the other Flash, oftentimes these things wrap up very quickly right at the end. I got to say, having read a few Golden Age comics now, I've been reading some of the early Superman, Flash, Batman. The Batmans, I think, have been the most engaging. And I think that's largely because he's non-superpowered and he's dealing with non-superpowered people. So there's a little bit more detective work and all that stuff involved. This is the challenge when you're doing superpowered characters. If you don't have them fighting superpowered, villains. So to showcase number 8 and Barry Allen. So Iris is waiting in the park for Barry, and she's annoyed because he's late. And this giant 3-story mystery box appears in the park, seemingly out of nowhere. And she's wondering what's going on. Everybody else is as well. Well, where's Barry? Barry is helping a little kid get a ring out of like a storm drain. And he's trying like with this little, string at first. It doesn't work. So he vibrates his hand so that it can push the bars out of the way. Now, wait a minute. Why would that push the bars out of the way? I don't know. They're creative in his use of powers. They're also creative in the way they interpret the physical laws of the universe in Flash. But it works, and he does get the ring for the kid. And when he finally shows up at the park, Iris is annoyed, but she's also a news photographer. There is a story here, and she's going to stay and she's going to cover it. Now, Barry uses his head and says, this giant box to me says there's maybe a crime going on somewhere else in the city. This is a distraction. So he, you see, whizzes through Central City, all over the place, looking for a crime that might be committed. Also, almost gets caught on film. In the photo booth he changes in, but he's moving too fast. Doesn't work. He does, in fact, find a crime, a jewel robbery, and he apprehends the person involved, who is dressed up kind of like a magician. And so he runs up the side of this building and gets, or actually, I'm sorry, looks like up the side of a rope. Pretty good. And catches the guy. Heads back to the park, and what does he discover? Well, they've opened up that big giant box, and there's another one inside, a smaller box. Aha. Probably another crime. Iris wants him to go get her coffee and a sandwich while she deals with this. Sure, gives him an excuse to get out of there. And he, in fact, does find another one of these magicians. Or, well, at the time, he thinks maybe the same magician. He got out. He's committing another crime. No. It's like a twin. He gets them both in prison. But why are they laughing? What is going on here? Well, there's a third box inside that second box. I love Barry's expression there. I love the work on Iris, that close-up. I love the framing in that panel. It's great stuff. Infantino, I mean, he was amazing, honestly. So off he goes to find the third crime, which is taking place at a bank. And this time, the magician, triplets, I guess, has an electrified sort of suit. So when Barry tries to grab him, he gets shocked. So how to deal with it? Well, he starts hurling all this coins, all this change at the guy at super speed, and this drains the battery power out of his electric suit, allowing him to capture him. You really kind of thought there was going to be a lot more about how these guys managed to do all this stuff, but there wasn't. But he catches the guy, never does get that coffee and sandwich for Iris, but they decide, I guess, to, go out and have lunch or dinner or something. And there you go. That is the second appearance of Barry Allen. The first two stories have been okay. There's a lot of novelty involved, and that's true with the original Flash as well. And that's sustaining them right now. Things are about to get turned up a notch, though, especially for the Silver Age Flash. On to our third appearance of each character. Flash Comics number 3, March of 1940, and Showcase number 13, March of 1958. So, the Silver Age Flash appears in 56. His third appearance is in 58. This is about 9 months after the other story. So he's, Showcase was for a lot of different characters, but clearly the Flash is starting to catch on. So let's see what these two get up to. Well, in Jay Garrick's case, former Major Williams is believed to potentially be a spy. So this is Joan's father. Oh, Jay, I need your help. Father is, okay, I know, Joan. I've seen the newspaper. So I noticed the newspaper, the town cackle. Okay. And so the cackle appears to be pushing for him to be convicted as a spy. So what's going on there? Why are they so interested? Well, I'm going to go find out. Into his uniform, and off he goes. Love this shot of him running through, blowing the script. You get the sense that if it was done right, The Flash would have made a great serial in the 1940s. I don't mean like a breakfast cereal. I mean a movie serial. If you could have figured out the special effects and how to do it, and I think they could have relatively cheaply, I think it would have been a great serial because you get the action and all that, but it is kind of funny. They take a humorous look at things and how people react to what the Flash is doing. Also, I love the fact that the Flash does not care that he's freaking people out. Okay, so he overhears the publisher of the Cackle sending a guy off to frame Williams. So Flash intercepts the guy, whips him out of a taxi, and also whips his clothes off of him. Once again, Flash has stripped a guy down to his shirt and his shorts. It doesn't go any further than that. And he whips him all around town at super speed. The guy's like freezing to try to get him to confess, but he doesn't. So he ends up leaving him on top of the Eiffel Tower. So you give the guy time to think about, what he's done and what he needs to do. So off Flash goes to the jail, sneaks into the jail so he can confer with Major Williams. And he discovers he has important papers in his safe at his home. Flash rushes over there. Too late. The bad guys have already gotten the papers. And so back to the Empire State Building, finally convinces the guy to confess everything by spinning him around as a top. And from that, he's able to, get to the publisher of the magazine, and he breaks up the whole attempt to frame Major Williams. And they do let you know in this one that Jay Garrick is widely known and feared as the Flash. So Major Williams doesn't know who he is, but everybody else does. Let's flip over to the fabulous 1950s and showcase number 13, March of 58. This one, written by Robert Kanigher again, penciled by Carmine Infantino, inks by Joe Giella. I should mention Flash Comics number 3, written by Gardner Fox, and pencils art by Everett E. Hibbard. Okay, so in this one is going to have Barry Allen buzzing around the world in 80 minutes. And so we begin with him late to a date with Iris, who is angry. Remember these guys? They were doing a lot of work that was not superhero-oriented. Romance comics, things of that nature. So they were very good at handling just normal people in normal clothes, doing normal things. But look at the staging. Look at the way really nice work there. Something that a lot of modern comics have trouble with, I think, is taking those moments that are not super dramatic because it's not a fight scene between a hero and a villain and making them interesting. Look at the old comics. You get some really good tips for how to do that stuff. So Barry has developed a radio wristwatch that allows him to receive alerts from all over the world, which realistically means like he'd be going insane because there's always some kind of crime going on. Thousands of crimes probably going on at every moment in the world. But for this story, we want to really showcase his super speed. So he gets an alert of something going on in Paris. So off he goes. And I love at super speed running through, he sees Iris and he gives her a little peck on the cheek as he's going by. She would probably be unaware of it. She's just like this wind rushes by her. Again, really creative use of the super speed and just nice little touches in this comic. I'm really developing a love for the Silver Age Flash reading these. Turns out there's this terrorist on the Eiffel Tower who has a small atomic bomb, and he's going to drop it if anybody messes with him. He has a hostage. She kind of gets away, but Flash can't get close to the guy, and he ends up falling over the side with the woman. And here we get first use of the arm with the vortex so that he can stop his fall. And then with the other arm, he creates a sucking vortex to pull the criminal in and kind of hold his arms so he can't move and can't drop the bomb. And they manage to get safely to the ground and disarm the guy. He then whizzes off to Egypt, where there's a bandit chief on a pyramid that he has to deal with, which he does. He next whizzes off to Everest, where there's this avalanche threatening this village, resort, whatever. He turns all the snow into water. Well, now there's like a tidal wave, and so he manages to get rid of the water as well and save a woman. So he's doing good. Rushing off back home, there's a pirate submarine. A lot of pirate submarines show up in the Silver Age. Apparently the idea was, and they do this in the Batman movie too, the military just sold off its old submarines that it didn't need pretty much to anybody. And a lot of pirates got a hold of them. Well, he stops these guys from taking out a gold shipment, and he gets back to Central City in time for his date with Iris. So for once, he is not late. See, isn't it easy to keep an appointment if you give yourself plenty of time? Yes. So there we go. Nice issue. And again, we're getting the character of these two characters, the comedy with Jay Garrick. We're getting a little bit of sometimes the Flash is funny. It's not a dark comic by any means. And the inventiveness, and of course, just the unbelievable art from Infantino. Look at that. Look at that panel. This is two people. It's great with the emotion on unbelievable. On to the fourth appearances. Flash Comics number 4, April of 1940. Again, Flash does not get the big cover image on this one. And we're going to be looking at Showcase number 14, June of 1958. The 40s Flash story is written by Gardner Fox, art by Everett E. Hibbard. Showcase 14, the story there is written by Robert Kanigher, art by Carmine Infantino, inks again by Frank Giacoia. So let's see what we got. And wait, look at that cover to Showcase. Kind of suggests something, doesn't it? Okay. For Jay Garrick, it all begins on the docks where he hears a woman crying. And it turns out to be a woman named Marcia Van Dorn who had been kidnapped. She's on this boat. She managed to get away and swim away. And so Flash is going to have to do something about this. So he needs to get to this yacht. Well, as we have often seen him do, he strips the guy down at super speed. In this case, it's to get his clothes because he needs something to wear to sort of get on this yacht. I think it's kind of like a little bit maybe like a gambling yacht, one of those deals. So he has to get out there. He needs this guy's clothes, so he borrows them. Once he gets out there, he starts using his super speed. Because remember, with his super speed, they make it very clear. He can just basically be invisible. Nobody can actually see him. So he uses that, some other things, to make everybody think that the boat is haunted. And he gets into the files to figure out like what these guys are up to. And so uses the ploy again back on the dock. These crooks think that Marcia Van Dorn was killed. He makes them think she's returned as a ghost to scare them a little bit more. Ultimately, he, dives in, outraces their boat, manages to stop them from fleeing, turns them into the cops. See, this guy ain't human. You get the idea. And then home to Joan, wants to wake her up because, hey, man, he's in need of excitement. It's like he hasn't done anything fun at all today, which I guess you could maybe read that it's 1940. We're not doing that in 1940. For Barry Allen, he's late to an appointment with Iris. She's annoyed. What else is new? We do get a nice moment in the restaurant showing off super speed as a waitress drops this glass. He manages to grab it, get the water back into it, return it. Kind of similar to something we saw Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man do in one of those movies. But again, nice use of the speed and nicely illustrated use of the speed. So we get a very Silver Age sort of story here with a UFO showing up. And it's been appearing. So Joan gets into an airplane so she can go get a picture of it. Again, she's a photojournalist. That's what she does. And she disappears. And Barry freaks out, gets into costume. He's got to get up to those UFOs, tries to hitch a ride on a rocket, doesn't work out. So what does he end up doing? Remember, guys, fourth appearance of the Flash. He breaks the time barrier. We all know that this leads to problems for the Flash in the future, but he's already breaking the time barrier. And by doing so, he discovers this alien invasion fleet that's sort of like, it kind of seems like it's out of phase with our time, because you can see the city there in the background. And so they're these tiny little aliens, but you see the alien starts growing larger and larger until they are giants. And so the Flash has to take them on in a fight somewhat similar to the Atom, right? So he's, thud on the guy's toe, etc. And he manages to get this giant, I think he's doing like friction on his foot, to get him to drop this glass tube that they have Iris in. So he manages to get Iris out and rescue her, and he uses his super speed to destroy the alien invasion fleet. And then, what does it say? Wham, crack, blam, through the time barrier back to normal time. And Iris says, maybe you could give Barry Allen some tips on how to speed up a little bit. Sounds like an impossible task. So we got a little bit of a Lois Superman thing going there. The little love triangle in this case with Barry Flash and Iris West. But a good issue. And again, very creative, some great art. So let's get into the fifth appearance of each of these characters. So in our fifth story with the original Flash, written by Gardner Fox, drawn by Everett Hibbard, kind of start mid-action here. He finds this painter on the beach who is marked for assassination and rescues him. So what is the deal? Well, Flash overhears, like in this taxi, this plot. And basically, there's an art collector who's trying to make his collection of this guy's paintings more valuable by killing the artist. Not a good guy. Flash decides he's got to get this guy away. So he's going to get him on this train, and he's kind of outrunning this train, right? And you see the guy there who looks a little bit like the original version of Hank Hill from Beavis and Butthead. If he's at Junctionville ahead of me, I'll eat my hat. I must be going daffy. Overwork, I guess. Well, he does get there before the guy, and they do actually show the guy eating his hat. So he gets him out of danger and finds that this guy who is behind all this, who's called Vandal, not Vandal Savage, different Vandal, is basically trying to steal all the world's art treasures. So he sends his guys to this museum to steal this statue. And Flash gets in there first, takes the statue, and at super speed creates a new one himself. Not bad, Flash, old boy, not bad. And replaces it so this guy steals a fake statue. At last you see, he unwraps it. I've been tricked, so this is the guy, this is Vandal. So he is like wanting to get all the art treasures of the world. So Flash goes, well, best way to punish this guy is to basically steal all of his art treasures, and look at him. That's why I took the name Vandal, because the ancient Vandals destroyed all artwork. I wanted to make my collection even greater than what they destroyed. So basically the guy's crazy, but it ultimately works. He uses his assassins to try to take out, Flash, etc. Super speed, gets a hold of all of them. You can see there's a little bit of the comedy there as well. The Golden Age Flash stories, not intricate plots, pretty basic. That wasn't one of their best stories, honestly. It's too bad they were not really taking that leap to, what if we have a superpowered person that he has to face? It'll probably come later. But meanwhile, Flash now leaves Showcase for his own magazine. And what I love is, it's not the Flash #1, it's the Flash #105, because they continue the numbering from Flash Comics. So in essence, Flash Comics just becomes the Flash a few years after it had stopped being published. So this is from June of 1958, written by John Broome, art by Carmine Infantino, inks by Giella. So these Flash magazines have 2 stories each. The first one is against this metallic sort of alien. Well, he's not exactly an alien. Apparently, before humanity, there was this other civilization on Earth of these metallic beings. That civilization was destroyed by a meteor or a comet, and only this guy, Katmos, survives. He has been awakened, and he decides, technically, I was here first. The entire planet is mine. And so here we get a little bit of Iris West. They're changing up the look a little bit as they go. I think about this point is where they kind of settle on what they want her to look like. But you can already see there's sort of, if you were half the man Flash is, Barry Allen. So they're going for that kind of rivalry there. So this metallic guy shows up, starts stealing things, steals this giant transformer. So Barry finds out about it. This guard calls the police. And he rushes in, and he finds that he can't grab the guy. He's too slippery, and he uses like this high-tech weapon against him and seals him in this glass tube, kind of like what those aliens did to Iris the last time Flash showed up. We get the interesting use of powers as he vibrates his feet and stomps them at super speed so that he can get out of the tube, which works. While he's in there, he finds out more about Katmos' history, and ultimately is really able to take him out with a punch. So instead of grabbing him, just hit him really hard in the face, and ends up having lunch with Iris. The next story in this mag, though, introduces the Master of Mirrors. Yes, the Mirror Master. So another really key component of Flash's Rogues Gallery shows up in this one. So the Mirror Master, while he was in prison, takes these photography courses and this and that and figures a lot of stuff out. And he figures out how to capture a person's image on a plate and then project that image as a sort of solid hologram under his control. So his first attempt is in this bank. He uses this guy who's like either a bank president or a clerk, one or the other. So interesting. Again, the pseudoscience is strong here. Flash ends up, getting word of this. He shows up at the bank. He chases this guy who apparently is faster than he is, and he leads him into this old house, and it's kind of a trap. So he gets in there. First, there's this hollow mirrors. He manages to solve that problem with some black paint, finding the real person. Doesn't know it's a hologram yet. He next is led into this room where there's this giant solid mosquito. So again, basically like Mirror Master, you know how you can blow photographs up. He can blow these images up, make them giant. He manages to destroy it, break them apart by moving at the speed of light. So he then drills his way into the basement where he faces this really freaky looking minotaur, and he manages to defeat it by turning the lights off. So he figures out, okay, light is the key here. And so keeping the lights off, he manages to stumble around at super speed and find the Mirror Master and deal with him and take him to prison and then go out to dinner with Iris. So another element of Silver Age comics, and the Flash for sure, is straight up pseudoscience. It's kind of it's like a lot of conspiracy theories. It sounds like it kind of makes sense until you start looking a little deeper into it. But that's just an element of Silver Age comics and the Flash. And, at least he's using his pseudoscientific powers for good and not evil. So now we're midway through. Flash Comics number 6 from June of 1940, and The Flash number 106 from May of 1959. I always think of Flash and the Silver Age as being the 60s, but it really does start in the mid-1950s. That's where these characters originate. Flash Comics number 6 by Gardner, Fox, Everett, E. Hibbard. Flash 106 by John Broome, Carmine Infantino, and Joe Giella. All right, so starting with the Golden Age Flash. They're reminiscing about going to school, and she reads about a guy they knew, Wally Stevens, of Western, running in the mile. He's sure to win. So we're talking a track meet here, and I believe it's to decide who gets to go to the Olympics. They go to watch, and Wally there is favored. No, this is no relation to Wally West. But after a couple laps, he starts to falter, and he's kind of grabbing at his shirt. So Jay Garrick investigates. You know, he goes, man, I couldn't breathe all of a sudden. So Jay takes the shirt and he's going to test it for drugs. So he does investigate, figures out there's a drug involved. He says, look, let's sign me up for this competition. And then I can kind of get inside and investigate. So Joan turns in the form, hangs around, and overhears the head of this Western Athletic Union plotting about things, you know, and she overhears this other guy talking to him. You see him, you fool, keep your mouth shut about these things. She's just a dumb dame, but the dumb dame is pretty smart. I like that little bit. So this gambler went in there. So this guy Dorn is involved in fixing these races, and apparently by using drugs to do so. So Jay's figured out this drug. So he decides to try it for the Olympics as well. And, you know, of course, being the Flash, he does rather well. You see the announcer freaking out at how quick this guy is, speeding past everybody. I don't believe it, folks. I can't. Jay Garrick just ran 8 laps in less than 30 seconds. If you don't mind, I'm going to faint. So they're going for the comedy again with these guys. And so the gamblers are like, we got to get rid of this Jay Garrick guy. He's going to screw everything up for us. So they send a couple thugs in with guns. Of course, he's kind of zipping around them. They don't know what's going on. And then he, you know, gets a confession out of a guy, goes off to see Dorn, you know, and gets a confession out of him, and basically breaks up the crime ring so the Olympics can go on without any hitch, other than World War II, which the U.S. isn't involved in yet, but, you know, a lot of other people are. At any rate, you know, again, it's fine enough as a story. It's not super scintillating. Really, the pull for these things is Jay Garrick and the sort of comedic element to some of the stuff he does. Meanwhile, Barry Allen is about to deal with the menace of the super gorilla. Yep, Gorilla Grodd showing up in, May of 1959. We start with this super scientific drill device coming out of the ground. I have arrived without being seen. Now I can begin my plan. So that's Grodd, of course. Now, we then flip over to this guy, Fred Pearson, who is a gorilla impersonator. One of my soft spots. I love gorilla impersonators in movies. And he feels like he's losing his mind because he's kind of blacking out at night. And then people are seeing this gorilla around the city. And he's like, am I the one doing this? You know, is it me? Is it when I'm out? Do I not know what's going on? Flash gets out there investigating, and he sees this vehicle moving at unbelievable speed. I love the way that Infantino does. As Flash is catching up to this thing, you see it becoming more distinct. Really nicely done. But he ends up losing it. He doesn't end up catching it in the end. By the way, Pearson here looks to me like, well, kind of like Bruce Campbell does now, which means I really want to see Bruce Campbell in a gorilla suit in a Flash movie. Can we please make this happen? But he gets knocked out, and this gorilla shows up, and he's convinced that, like, you know, people are starting to suspect him. He's like, I don't think it was me. Somebody knocked me out. So here we have it. Here's our first real appearance of Gorilla Grodd. He has this plan. Solivar is in Central City, and he needs to find him so he can steal knowledge from his mind of how to control other people's minds. And here you see him finding where he is. He was basically kind of let himself be captured and put in this zoo so Grodd couldn't find him. Or a circus, I'm sorry. But Grodd does find him, and he does get the information. So Solivar says, I've got to seek out the Flash. He's the only one who can help me. Flash kind of gets home to see a gorilla in his apartment. But they talk it out, figure out what's going on, say, okay, we got to get to Gorilla City. Meanwhile, we see that Grodd has taken over. I love the gorilla army there with their rifles and their helmets. Really great design. He gets over there and really very, very quickly defeats Grodd just by knocking him out. Kind of anticlimactic for Gorilla Grodd's first appearance, and then assures this guy, the gorilla impersonator, that all is well. Our second story involves the Pied Piper, so another major rogues gallery villain. A jewel robbery is happening in Central City. The crooks suddenly just freeze and feel compelled to go somewhere else, and they're drawn there by the Pied Piper and his musical vibrations from his horn, and he's taking over organized crime in Central City. And so we again have, Barry dealing with Iris West and all that kind of stuff. That's going to be very frequent. So he goes to have like a date with her at her apartment, have dinner, and hears over the radio this challenge from the Pied Piper. And so he rushes out, and you see Iris is like, "What? He walks out on me?" So he first encounters a Pied Piper who paralyzes him with his music, but Flash keeps on coming. So he uses his music to create this tidal wave in this river that washes Flash away, kind of knocks him out, but he still keeps coming, uses an earthquake. He falls into this hole, but very quickly dashes back out of it. And at super speed, basically creates a vortex that sucks the Pied Piper and his gang into this wind so they can't do anything, and deposits them in prison, and then gets back to Iris and says, "Oh, I just went out for a paper," which apparently is already reporting the story. Now look, the Flash can move like at the speed of light. I'm not sure the papers can. Maybe, no, I don't think this would have worked. But anyways, that's what they do with this one. So in this issue, we get Gorilla Grodd and the Pied Piper both, and we're really starting to gel the feel of this comic strip. Seventh appearance of each character, July 1940. This is a Gardner Fox Everett Hibbard story. And then we're dealing with Flash number 107, July 1959. John Broome, Carmine Infantino, Joe Giella. Yeah, I got some papers here. Well, I'm supposed to remember all this. So with the Flash, we got a little bit of pseudoscience here. A guy who is called Black Mike. It wants to steal this guy's invention. This is in Duluth, Minnesota. They make sure we know. So meanwhile, Jay Garrick is tooling around in his car, and all of a sudden the car disappears from underneath him, which maybe his, I guess he maybe would still be like on the seat a little bit. Now there'd be some metal in the seat. Well, either way, he isn't killed by this. Hopefully, it looked like he was putting on some pretty good speed there, but he's not hurt. So basically, this invention can disintegrate metal. And which you'd think it's a pretty powerful weapon. Black Mike wants to use it to fix a race. And this, I loved this old dude, I've seen queer doings around here. My cow Bossy loses her bell, although the leather strap is still around her. So still going for the comedy. So Black Mike has kidnapped this guy so that he can make this weapon for him to disintegrate metal so he can fix an auto race. The Flash gets involved investigating. He steals this part that he needs, the adjuster gone. I must have it to make my invention work. And you notice the whirling? That basically means the Flash is invisible when he's doing that. So he takes it along with him, takes it to a friend of his who is like a mechanic and stuff. And he's like, well, I don't know what this thing is, but they kind of figure out ultimately what it might be for. And so that they're going to use it to fix this auto race. We see our gangsters here. And of course, Flash shows up, kind of gets the lowdown on it, taunts Black Mike. Nobody's here. I'm going daffy. You will be daffy tomorrow. So tomorrow is the big race where all of a sudden, in the middle of the race, cars start disappearing. So you see that the Flash's friend is like favored in this race. And so all of a sudden, the car's gone. So Flash, finds Black Mike, goes after him, whirls him around, throws him out of a window to get a confession from him. Of course, catches him before he can get hurt. Flash manages to stop Black Mike and recover the weapon for the government, which you got to think, well, then that means when the U.S. enters World War II, apparently we can dissolve all the enemy metal. You like how some of these things, like they put these crazy inventions out there, and then sort of forget that they ever existed. In the Silver Age, we immediately have the return of Gorilla Grodd, so the character must have made an impact. All of these drilling vehicles start showing up all over the world, drilling up through the ground. And Solivar realizes that Grodd has escaped prison in Gorilla City, so he reaches out and touches Barry Allen. No, I know that sounds weird. I'm talking, the old phone commercials, reach out and touch someone. Okay. Lets him know Grodd has escaped. There's evil afoot. So Barry, as Flash, rushes across the Atlantic to Africa, back to Gorilla City. And what they discover is Grodd manages to have drilled down into the hollow earth. And there's this species of birdmen there. And he's convinced them to help him take over the surface world because the surface people are all evil. So Flash goes after Grodd, but he has this machine that there's like a special air in the hollow earth. And this machine solidifies it around the Flash. So he's kind of like encased in crystal. All right. Okay. Pretty cool. So how does he get out of it? Well, he just rocks back and forth, which you kind of would think that they would have figured that out. Grodd is like that super genius who just misses the obvious all the time. And in this case, he's taken out by some super fast punches from the Flash, who also kind of convinces the bird people, we're not evil, we're not your enemies. They're peaceful, they don't want any war either. So we get rid of Grodd. Again, a little bit, anticlimactic there. It's not that hard. It's so much of these stories is about kind of for the readers to guess what the twist is or guess how Flash is going to stop, get out of a particular situation. The second story has another speedster show up in Central City with no memory. And so Iris decides, let's set up a race for charity between Flash and this new speedster. Wouldn't that be interesting? Well, this other speedster seems to be faster than Flash. So she says, well, he can run backwards. Well, he does. And he still actually ends up winning. The Flash decides to electrocute him because he doesn't want a rifle. No. He doesn't do that. So Flash takes this guy to a doctor. They hook him up to this machine. And as he, this jolt of electricity, as it hits him, I guess this is to end the amnesia. Well, it works. He gets his memory back and he loses his super speed. And it turns out he's not a human being or even an alien. He is an alien android. And he is like part of this, intergalactic police force or a galactic police force. There's a great catastrophe that must be solved. Essentially, there's a planetoid with a hole to another dimension. And it's going to basically, like this rip in reality is going to destroy everything if it can't be closed. So it's now up to Barry because he still has super speed. So they take off. And this is like his first real foray into going into space and alien worlds, which is just a hallmark of DC at this point in time. So they get there. You see great graphics on what this weird hole looks like. And so Flash manages to stop it. How does he stop it? He runs around in circles really fast around it. And that seals it. Okay. It's maybe not the greatest plot twist in the world, but there you have it. The novelty remains. So, appearance number 8 for our two Flashes. So, Flash number 8 is written by Gardner Fox, art by Everett Hibbard. And we do see that Flash actually gets on the cover on this one. The Flash number 108 is from September 1959. John Broome, Carmine Infantino, Frank Giacoia. All right. So for Jay Garrick, he manages to save a woman from being crushed by debris. I love the look on her face. Oh, how can I ever thank you? My, what an unusual costume. I love in these old strips, people seem to be dealing with the Flash as though he is, in fact, an absurdity. They're not used to superheroes running around at this point, and they do make that very apparent. So what happens is Flash figures out that there are some folks building faulty buildings. They're using cheap materials. They're trying to cut costs. There's some Superman stories from the period. Same basic idea. It seems like it may have been a problem that was in the newspapers at the time. So Flash, invisible, gets in this car with this guy who's like working with the crooks to find out, where they're at. And I love the guy's reaction to an invisible man. Again, 80s action comedy, these would work great. So he gets to this clever construction company, and there's a great bit here where he calls his big boss, so there's a bigger ringleader. So while he's on the phone, Flash rushes to the telephone exchange. We're talking kind of like light speed, so he's there in a second, so that he could figure out where that call is going and then figure out the location, of where the big boss is. So he gets to the, ringleader's house, who escapes through a trapdoor, and he tries to set up a labor strike, to screw everything up more in the building industry. Flash manages to convince these guys, don't do this, man. Do your job right. Guys get back to work. They all go along with it. So now he needs to get this ringleader. He has the evidence that he needs for the DA. He manages to track the guy to wrestling matches. He's attending wrestling matches. And so he takes out like one of the wrestlers and basically takes his place, and then manages to sort of juggle this ringleader until he's willing to confess. So he kind of like throws him. I guess he's spinning him and throwing. Sometimes you go, well, he's super fast, but does he have super strength? Apparently he does when he needs it. So there you go. So with Flash, we kind of get a little bit of a, if you'll excuse the term, flashback. He's dealing with this alien from another dimension, Key Felig of the world of Moru. So he has Flash trapped on this treadmill that he can't get off of. And no, it's not the cosmic treadmill thing that's going to show up later. So Moru is this other dimension. Here we see like the police in that dimension who are dealing with Key Felig, who's a criminal there. So Flash, still on his treadmill, figures out, maybe if I go to my maximum speed, I can get off of this thing. So he does. And again, we get some really wonderful art here. Suddenly he goes faster than the treadmill can and manages to run off of it, and goes so fast that he sees, these super fast aliens, and follows them, and they sort of pop out of reality. So he manages to pop into their dimension as well by kind of following them. And, you see them flee, can't let them escape. So great art here. So basically, they were stealing seemingly useless items that had been struck by lightning in our world, because they can use the lightning power to gain super speed in their world. And basically, Flash manages to wrap them up pretty easily. So it's kind of cute. I like the design on the aliens. It's not like a masterful story. But what comes next, though, I think, is going to seal a particular supervillain as the true arch enemy of the Flash. Gorilla Grodd is back. He has discovered mind over matter. So we get like 3 appearances in a row of Grodd, very similar to early Batman and Joker. Joker just starts showing up all the time, and you can kind of see this is the main guy. So Grodd manages to escape Gorilla City again, and he uses this device to super evolve himself. Meanwhile, back in Central City, Barry Allen, late to a meeting with Iris, and has to be even later to save her from a crash, to save her life. And she mentions to Barry, I think it was, that he was a shoo-in for Man of the Year in Central City until this guy named Drew Drowden showed up. And this dude is like a stock market whiz. And he's just, how do you do it? How do you have a system? My superior mental power. So this dude is building this absolute fortune. Okay. And Ooh, he seems like he might be evil there, huh? No, this is not Lex Luthor. So he's going to use his fortune to build a factory to invent a pill which will give him telekinetic powers over the world. Okay? Amazing art right here. So he gains these powers, but in the process, we discover that Drew Drowden is the super evolved gorilla Grodd as he turns back into the gorilla. Just look at that art. It is unbelievable what Infantino could do. So we once again have Flash versus Grodd. When Grodd, turns back into a super gorilla, he loses those extra powers that he has. And so, but he's like, but I can get them back. What do we do? Flash takes his super evolving machine, melts it with friction, turns it into handcuffs, and captures Grodd. And therefore, easily, Flash manages to win Man of the Year of Central City. This is actually going to come up in a later story as well. We're going to get there pretty soon. So for our 9th appearances, we're in September of 1940 for the original Flash. Gardner Fox, Sheldon Moldoff doing the art in this one. He did an awful lot of Batman art all the way into the 1960s. And the Flash number 109 from November of 1959, John Broome, Carmine Infantino, Joe Giella. This one doesn't have quite the humor of some of the earlier ones, but basically in New York, so we're still in New York with Jay Garrick, he gets this strange message. Queer footprints, bank robberies. No wonder Jim Evans is scared. So a friend of him sends him this message. He whizzes off to the country where he's living in like a cabin and discovers a giant lizard. Kind of looks like the giant Gila monster from that old movie. So he discovers this guy badly hurt who lets him know that these bad guys have bred an army of giant lizards to use to rob banks. Well, okay, so finally we're getting a little bit more. I mean, we saw some super science with the ray that dissolves metal. Now we're getting some sort of super beasts for Flash to fight. So he learns where the laboratory is that they're breeding these things, but too late to stop them. So the giant lizards go into this town to cause all this sort of panic. And, well, they kind of just end up bombing them out of existence. Not really the greatest Flash story of all time. Uses a little bit of his ingenuity, but not much. It kind of lacks the humor that we normally get from the Flash. Back in the Silver Age, another appearance by the Mirror Master, who, having his picture taken by Iris West in his cell, the Flash goes off and he disappears. How does he do it? Well, he has developed this light aura that he can use to essentially turn invisible, and he uses it to start robbing banks. Initially, this does work against the Flash. Can't find him to do anything. And he has this mirror that he uses to shrink Flash to miniature size, and apparently to make his belt disappear in one frame along the way. So here we get some real Silver Age pseudoscience. Flash rushes back to his laboratory and uses a light to regrow himself, because light causes the cells of plants to grow. Like I said, weird pseudoscience in a lot of these things. Well, now Flash is ready, though, for Mirror Master. He wraps him up in a carpet so he can't use his aura or light against him, delivers him to the police. But the last laugh is on him, on Barry, who slips on one of the Mirror Master's mirrors, knocks himself unconscious, and misses a date with Iris. And we all know how well that goes over with her. Flash Comics number 10 from October of 1940. Gardner Fox and Everett Hibbard. This is kind of an interesting one, and we're also going to look here at Flash from number 110, January of 1960. John Broome, Carmine Infantino, and Murphy Anderson. So with Golden Age Flash, he stumbles into like a kidnapping attempt. The thug thinks that he knocks Flash out, but he actually just faked the fall so that he can turn into the Flash and find out what these guys are up to. So he finds out that the guy that they were kidnapping or trying to kidnap is a former superintendent of schools. There's a new political regime in town. They're replacing everybody. And it turns out that they're replacing him with a dude who's like corrupt. So corrupt politicians, you get a lot of corrupt politician stories back in the 1940s, in case anybody thought that this was new. And you see Flash turns invisible, goes to the school thing, and he finds out they're using school funds for this guy's corporations. And so Flash deals with it the way he normally deals with these things. He uses his super speed to freak this guy out and scare the crap out of him. And so he decides, though, I'm going to show this guy, what's been going on. I'm going to show you how the poor people live that you keep taxing to live in luxury. Boy, it's like nothing ever changes. So along the way, he finds out about a bomb that's been planted on a bridge. He gets there in the nick of time and stops it from blowing up the bridge. People think he's maybe behind it at the time. So he finds out about this dude, this gangster that's behind all of it, Killer Kelly, I believe he was called. He goes to this his headquarters, his hideout is in this logging camp, rushes out there to stop him. The guy has a bunch of thugs. And so the guy, Killer Kelly, sets a trap that actually catches his own men. And so this is a nice little twist. Flash convinces these guys, look, man, he was going to let you die. Why don't you help me? And so they all team up against Killer Kelly and manage to catch him. And then you see the thugs are like, stand aside, Flash. We're going to give him some lead poisoning. Get it? No, he's going back to pay the penalty for the crimes he's committed. So, of course, Flash is not going to let these guys just murder the dude. Meanwhile, Silver Age Flash is being introduced to the Weather Wizard. So, as usual, Barry's worrying about a date with Iris, but there's weird weather which alerts him that there might be some kind of a danger. He goes rushing off and encounters the Weather Wizard. Look at the design on this guy. Do any other supervillains look anything like this at the time? It's absolutely incredible. Infantino, God bless him. So we get the typical, superpower versus superpower. Who's the most clever of the two? And Weather Wizard gets away. And what we get, Flash runs into this U.S. Marshal who kind of gives him the lowdown on who this guy is, on what his history is. And we get to the point where he invents his wand, creates his costume. And look, if you don't accept the costume idea of superheroes and villains, you're just not buying into the fantasy world that this stuff represents. Yes, obviously, if you invent a weather controlling wand, you're going to become a supervillain. You've got to have a costume. It's just how it's done. We get a duel between these. There's this giant glacier. And so Flash has to deal with that. He melts it. There's going to be flooding. He's got to stop the flood. And eventually he runs so fast that he creates a wave front that knocks out the Weather Wizard. Really pretty cool. Nice introduction. And of course manages to show up. I want to say he was rushing to meet Iris, and then he realizes, oh crap, I'm still in my Flash costume. See Iris there? She's looking maybe a little suspicious. The backup story is a big deal here because it introduces Iris's nephew, Wally West, who you see, little kid here. Flash is his hero. He wants to meet the Flash. And so Barry, this is great. Barry is known to be a friend of the Flash. And sometimes the Flash uses a spare room in Barry's apartment to change costume and stuff. So he's going to show that room to Wally. And you see, as Wally's walking towards the door, they do such a great job. Because we see this nowadays in movies with the Matrix kind of stuff. This is Infantino inventing this kind of thing right in front of our eyes in a comic. But he changes into the costume, gets into the room before Wally can. And so Wally gets a chance to actually meet his hero, the Flash. And And we also get to see how square Barry Allen is, which I love. I wish we had more square superheroes. Well, it must be fate, because Wally gets involved in the same exact kind of accident as Barry did and gains super powers. And so a partnership is now formed. I think initially he does not know that the Flash is Barry Allen right off the bat, but he gives him a costume of his own that looks just like the Flash's. So he really is Kid Flash here. We'll see that yellow costume sometime later. And he even gets a chance to use his superpowers while Barry watches on, kind of in case something goes wrong, to, get these escaped zoo animals back into their cages. Nice thing. So we get our first sidekick here for the Flash. I think first sidekick. We get the Flash's sidekick's first appearance here, Wally West. We also get the Weather Wizard in this issue. The Flash lore is developing before our very eyes. We now reach Flash number 11, Flash Comics number 11, November of 1940. Gardner Fox, Sheldon Moldoff doing the art in this one as well. You see Hawkman is on the cover. And I think at this point, Flash's story was the last story in the book. Hawkman's was the first. We're also going to look at the Flash number 111 from March of 1960. John Broome, Carmine Infantino, and Murphy Anderson. So in this one, Jay Garrick sees a woman kidnapped, turns into the Flash. Woman turns out to be a local glamour girl named Natalie Nixon. So he investigates. So he follows these guys, to the house where they take the, Natalie Nixon. Also overhears the phone number of their boss. He rescues the woman. And these guys are amazed. And the boss is like, if that woman just disappeared, it must be the Flash. So people are starting to catch on to his special abilities. And he knows he's after him. So the chief has this special pair of glasses made just for this circumstance that he believes will allow him to see the Flash when he's invisible. So again, we're starting to get the crooks find ways to counter the Flash's special abilities. The old standby, Jay deals with the thugs by basically removing their clothes at super speed. Haven't seen that ploy for a few issues, but it's back. But the crook, the chief, can see him with the glasses, opens fire on him, and he decides to retreat because he's like, how could he even, see me? He's got to figure out what's going on. So he goes to the library to see if he can figure out how this guy is doing it. Scares the heck out of the librarian. He finally does figure it out. And so now he's ready for this dude, rushes in, and in a way you can kind of be like, well, he could have just surprised him anyways at super speed, but rushes in, whizzes around him in this swivel chair. So the guy gets all super dizzy. You see, he's spinning like a top. Again, you can do great stuff with these things. Good comedy. Manages to catch the guy. And what does he say? Oh, that's all right, Sergeant. I feel it's my duty to use my unusual speed in helping you fellows fight for law and order. Man, Flash is just a good dude. For the Silver Age Flash, he's at a lecture from a Dr. Wiley Summers, guy he went to college with, who gives this lecture about these strange creatures he's discovered, these cloud creatures that emerged from a volcano. But unfortunately, his pictures did not develop, and people think that he's some kind of a crackpot. Well, nobody believes him, but the cloud creatures solved the problem for him by attacking. You see, they went after a U.S. Air Force base there, shooting sort of a lightning kind of thing, fire out of themselves. Love the art on these wings. They're bizarre. So Flash gets in there, tries to stop them with a tornado. They just fly higher. He can't create a tornado strong enough to bring them down. So he decides these things must have some kind of a nucleus, launches up the side of this mountain, and cloud hops, and they attack him, in their own way. But I think they're trying to suck him in. So he's like, okay. And he allows himself to be sucked in. And by doing that, he's able to destroy the nucleus, and he's able to defeat the evil cloud creatures. Pretty simple storyline. Great art, which saves a lot of it. The backup with Wally, he's using his superpowers kind of the way Jay Garrick did, maybe a little too indiscriminately. He has some learning to do. The main story, though, is about this youth gang, juvenile delinquents, a big deal at the time in all the newspapers, movies like High School Hellcats. These guys are called the Crimson Crows. They want revenge on the Eagles. They're going to have this big fight or something, but they end up starting this fire accidentally, and Wally manages to put it out. And then he's like, well, what am I going to do about the Crows? Well, the Crows decide to basically give up a life of crime and become an athletic club because they didn't mean to start a big fire, and they feel bad about it. Okay, again, kind of an anticlimax. The art's so damn good, though, you kind of go with it. So here we have come to the final 12th appearance, not the final, but the 12th appearance of both of these characters, and the finale to this very long video. Flash Comics number 12 from December of 1940, and The Flash number 112 from May of 1960. Flash Comics story is Gardner, Fox, and Everett Hibbard. So Hibbard is back on the art. John Broome, Carmine Infantino, Joe Giella doing the work in The Flash. And you could see a familiar character is showing up in Flash number 112. And in this one, the Flash goes to war. Now, we are a year away from Pearl Harbor. The general attitude, there was wrangling in the United States. Some people did not want to get involved. Some people wanted to get involved and at least wanted to help the Allies against the Axis powers. So in this one, Flash is approached by this ambassador from the nation of Crotavia, who wants help because Crotavia is being attacked by a neighbor. So we're not quite dealing with World War II, but this is what was in the air. So Flash is like, I will definitely help your country. He swims across the ocean in about 8 or 9 minutes. So he's going about 20,000 knots. And when he gets there, he discovers one of the enemies are the Neuralians. One of their submarines is going to take out an ocean liner. He manages to save all the people from the ocean liner. He whizzes into Crotavia and basically goes to war with the Neuralians. First thing you get him is he steals their war plans. Again, you can see the comic aspect of the Flash here. His next big move is to steal all the guns from the Neuralian soldiers, which doesn't stop them from wanting to attack. What ploy, what plan would Jay Garrick use to stop the enemy army at this point? He steals their clothes. It's like a theme, man. It's like his go-to move. He steals their clothes. They decide to quit. He then goes on to defeat the Navy and Air Force of Neuralia using paper bags and rubber bands. Seriously. So MacGyver, eat your heart out. But he does manages to end the hostilities with Neuralia. And you do get the sense of we need peace. We need to stop the war, not necessarily get involved in it. It was a big argument at the time. Okay. For Barry Allen, we get back to this idea of Man of the Year and the competition for it in Central City. And this guy, Elongated Man, has shown up and he is solving problems, saving people before Flash can get there. And Iris is like, oh, I think somebody else is going to win Man of the Year. And, Iris seems kind of taken with the idea of a guy who can elongate. Well, anyways. So we get a little flashback and we learn the history of this guy. Saw a India rubber man, as they called them, at like a carnival and decided he wanted to learn how to do it. And so he kind of, gets involved, finds out there's some kind of a trade secret. Eventually he discovers what it is. It's this, was it Gingold or something? So he gains the powers and good for him, decides to become a superhero. And so we get to see his first costume of old Ralph Dibny, who will go on to be, in the Justice League. And he lasts a really long time, has a really cool wife in the comic books later. So Iris is like, Barry might not get, or Flash might not get Man of the Year this time, in Central City. So Flash decides he's got to do something about this. He's also starting to wonder, maybe all these robberies that are going on that Elongated Man shows up for, maybe he's involved. So he sets this trap for this museum robbery. It kind of blows up in his face, but it doesn't work out. But Elongated Man shows up and we get this chase and he catches him and they basically work it out what's going on. He's like, I've been over there because I know they're trying to frame me for these robberies. So now they're buddies and they work together. You see some great use of super speed here. He manages to create this vortex around the car of the thieves, lifting it up. And so the Man of the Year award ends up being a tie between Flash and Elongated Man. And you see them shaking hands there and they're buddies. And it's really cool. So we do get the introduction of a new superhero who will, I don't know if he's ever gotten his own book, but he's going to show up in DC for decades to come. The backup has once again Wally West dealing with some young hoodlums. He has this heart-to-heart with the pretty young teacher at school and finds out, well, she's going to get married to her fiance who works with like the youth advisory committee. So he rushes in to find out what's going on. He finds this guy that she was talking about, the fiance, getting attacked by these young hoodlums. He breaks it up and the guy thinks, well, I'm on this youth advisory thing. And what might be happening is these kids are playing chicken on their go-mobiles. So they didn't call them go-karts yet. And I'm trying to make it so that they can't buy them. So they can't sell them to kids in town. Maybe that's what has them so angry. Well, what they end up finding out is, no, that's not it. It actually is because this guy owns a construction company, and a big out-of-town construction company came in and got the contract for building this new like school or maybe renovating it. They're using shoddy materials. And he had gone to the construction site and found out. And so once again, the young toughs come to attack him, and Wally West manages to stop them. And there we have it, the first 12 appearances of both of the Flashes. And sadly, we're not going to get to a meeting between the two Flashes, the DC multiverse being born, for about another year. So I couldn't cover that one. So what do we think about the Flash and the Flash? Well, Jay Garrick. And maybe I could first address both of them. The plots are not super intricate. These were comics meant for kids at the time. You kind of have to expect that. What I like about them is there's a lot of optimism. There's a lot of fun. There's a lot of humor, especially in the Golden Age Flash. And that, I think, does a lot for these characters. And I think is probably why both of them had such a large following for so long. And you have to say it, too, for the Barry Allen Flash. Infantino's art is absolutely amazing. The character designs, minimalist, but really cool. The Weather Wizard, just like, I don't know, man. Like, you don't see supervillains looking like that in comic books at this time. He takes the art really, for DC at that time, I think, to a new level. So let me know, folks, what you think in the comments about Jay Garrick and about Barry Allen and about that first year of Jay Garrick's existence, technically the first 4 years of Barry Allen's, 12 appearances over 4 years. Let me know what you think about these characters. Are they, some of your favorites? Are they not? I think they're both really amazing books. A lot of character, a lot of warmth, and a lot of fun in both of them. And man, we need that in comic books nowadays for sure. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, maybe share with a friend. If you do subscribe, hit that little notification button so you find out when more of my videos come out. I generally release videos Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. So until next time, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. Read some Flash comics, and I will see you again, hopefully soon, in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.